Welcome to Always See Everything, the movie podcast where we rank, review, and riff on every single film in the Criterion Collection. I'm Anthony, and this is my daughter, Sean.
Just in time for bikini weather. You got your beach body on lock?
Oh yeah, got it all, got it all King Kong style. We're doing great.
What does that mean?
King Kong style? You know, King Kong, we think of him as like a buff dude, which he is, but you know, he's got a little paunch, especially if he's the guy in the suit, you know? That's me. That's me. You know, I'm strong. I'm the strong kind of fat, you know? Like that's my vibe.
I do appreciate you not immediately going to dad bod, because I think most people, like, that's just easy for them. You've instead decided that King Kong body is a more helpful insight into your situation.
Right, physically. Right. Because dads don't have to be strong, you know? They don't, yeah. And you know, I'm strong, so that's why I'm trying to really convey that. It's we got it on lock. You know, King Kong, he goes on the beach. It's totally a thing that he does.
I remember in Kong vs. Godzilla, they call the desert the beach of Africa.
This episode, we are talking. This is our first episode where we've got video going. Maybe we might actually. It might have already been happening, but this is definitely the first episode where we're conscious of it. And
I've not a thing to wear.
Yeah,
I'm completely nude from the waist down. This is a crop top.
Right. That's why it's like it's from the belly button down, more like, you know, you're pulling a full like Winnie the Pooh.
Well, I'm sorry to say that my belly button starts at my waist.
Oh snap!
Wait. No one is more sorry to hear or say that than me. I just hate hearing it.
All our listeners are pretty sorry to hear that.
Well, for sure, but like I have to live with it.
It's true. Sheesh. You know what? No more questions, no follow-ups. That's the rule for this episode. We're entering a new season, so we've got to do new bits. So no follow-ups. That's our first rule. No follow-ups, all right? No asking questions, no follow-ups. That's rule number 1. Today
I like this already.
Yeah, today we're talking about the Decalogue. We're only covering. So last week we said that we were going to cover the whole Decalogue. We have a lot more to say about the Decalogue as a whole than we thought we would, and each individual film within the Decalogue, and so we're splitting it in half. Today we're covering Decalogue 1, Decalogue 2, Decalogue 3, Decalogue 4, Decalogue 5, and a short film about killing, which is just an extended cut of Decalogue 5. Sean, this was I threw you a curveball because I was like, we should do Decalogue. This should be like something we should do. I proposed this as like a season 1, you know, or season 2 beginner. This is the, you know, let's get into this. What do you think of this as like our foray into the next phase of the Criterion Collection?
Well, I think that it's very on theme for the beach season. I really think about fun in the sun and playing in the summertime when I watch these films.
Right.
I think that
where people are in sweaters basically the whole time and giant coats that kind of cover their faces.
Entirely in an apartment complex.
Yeah.
Hey, you know, Poland does have some wonderful beaches though.
Christmas and Christmas and you know, ice skating are both real big plot points in these films, but you know, it all works. It's all.
When we get to Decalogue 9, which is the spring break episode, then maybe it'll become a little bit longer.
They're all gonna come back. It'll all be a bunch of, you know, beautiful, like, you know, role playing, storytelling, character building stuff that really is inconsequential in the larger whole, but really adds to each of their characters. I'm really excited for that one.
I really like the part where the blonde observer smashed the watermelon in the Japanese beach game in Decalogue 9, which we haven't yet watched.
As did I. Maybe I get that reference, maybe I don't. But you know, no follow-ups, no questions. So we're moving forward.
I think that this is. I mean, I can't know the machinations of your mind, but I feel like you kind of thought of this as a way to cross off a big one, so to speak, starting off season 2. and it's, I mean, not so much like getting it out of the way, but to me, it's been a while before we've seen a big one. You know, like the
True.
last couple of weeks, it's like, okay, Jacques
Well,
Tati, like that's
Playtime was kind of a big one, but yeah, we talked
kind
about
of,
Tati as a
well,
whole.
but is it something that somebody would like? If someone was making fun of you for watching Criterion movies, like they wouldn't think of Playtime, they would say,
Maybe.
"Oh, are you gonna watch a 10-hour multi-part Polish film about the Ten Commandments or whatever?" And
True,
how it's
true.
actually a diagnosis of post-communist life in the 80s and 90s, and like I don't, like
Yeah,
it
I
seems
get you.
like one of
It's
those
not like
that's like
we're,
classic. Much like how we started with Grand
mm,
Illusion, which
mm,
was the most spy #1 in the Criterion Collection film you can imagine.
right,
This
right.
is a close second.
You're saying it's not big in terms of like the canon of film, although Decalogue is. But you're saying that that's not what we've been missing. What we've been missing is stuff that can get us teased on the playground. When you and I go to the playground, which is often, we hang out at the playground together. All the
Well,
all the
I have to
kids who
stay
are
at least
there.
200 feet away, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm kind of the mediator. I'm like 100 feet away so that I can like shout stuff to the other kids from you.
You
Yeah,
relay messages from the
exactly.
children, from me to the children, and
And, and I'm
you
like,
know,
and I remember like being on the playground just last week and yelling like hearing you yell and then me repeating like, well, it's actually a really good dissection of post-communism Poland in the 80s and 90s. You guys wouldn't understand. Yeah,
and then you got just savagely beaten.
I,
Just
I
so
did.
many purple nurples.
I did, and you couldn't do anything about it because you had to stay 200 feet away.
I could
It was
only,
awful.
I could only do this.
There we go. The visual jokes are coming in. The little shrug. You
Okay, check
look
this
like a
out.
Muppet when you do that, like Kermit the Frog. I'm going to read the Decalogue description, and then let's get into Decalogue 1, which is the first of these 10 films. Decalogue. This masterwork by... Oh, snap. There's no way I'm going to pronounce these names correctly. I am Polish. We should probably say that. I am Polish, and I can't pronounce these names.
Better you than me.
This masterwork by Krzysztof Kieslowski is one of the 20th century's greatest achievements in visual storytelling. Originally made for Polish television, Decalogue focuses on the residents of a housing complex in late communist Poland, whose lives become subtly intertwined as they face emotional dilemmas that are at once deeply personal and universally human. Its 10-hour-long films, drawing from the Ten Commandments for thematic inspiration and an overarching structure, grapple deftly with complex moral and existential questions concerning life, death, love, hate, truth, and the passage of time. Shot by 9 different cinematographers with stirring music by Zbigniew Preissner and compelling performances from established and unknown actors alike, Decalogue arrestingly explores the unknowable forces that shape our lives. Also presented are the longer theatrical versions of the series' fifth and sixth films, a short film about killing and a short film about love. Uh, I think we should get this out of the way right up front. This is a TV show.
Yeah.
We should not be covering this. No TV shows in the
Okay.
Criterion Collection. I'm starkly anti TV shows in the Criterion Collection. I know
We're
you.
reversing roles this season then, because I think a movie can be an hour long. And you know what?
Yes.
I
Oh, I
think more
agree.
should.
I agree twice. I made a movie that was an hour long. We won't talk about it because that would be embarrassing. But hour long movies can definitely like say everything you need to say. Um, but this was clearly made. I mean, I don't know clearly, but this was made for television. I kind of feel like if you're making it for that medium, you kind of shouldn't mess with it. I also understand that like this does not feel like something that would play well on television at all. Like this would not appear like it's not like something happens and then they cut to a commercial for soap or something, and I'm like, well, I'm riveted to know whatever happens next, right? Like, not that these aren't fascinating films, but they are not exactly like 3-act structure dramas where it's like you got to have a twist at the end of Act 1, you got to have a twist at the end of Act 2 type things.
Yeah, I can't really imagine what programming block this would be a part of. Like in between a documentary about like the history of clay pots in Japan, and then after that it's like the Polish Seinfeld equivalent.
The Polish Seinfeld equivalent.
Can you imagine fucking Polish Seinfeld?
Uh, well,
What would the situations be? Like
uh,
it
they
would
they
be
they
like a whole like Polish Kramer would come in and say, "Polish Jerry,
what's
you need to help me change this light bulb." And then the entire rest of the hour long episode is them quietly and silently cursing under their breath as they try and change the light bulb.
I mean, that's pretty good. That's pretty funny. I was just gonna say, like, I don't know what does Kramer come in and he's, hey guys, you know what, I've got a new get rich scheme, sauerkraut. This is my new thing now, and you're like, oh, like I don't know what the Polish specifics are that you could just
Uh,
like transfer
that
over to Seinfeld.
that their names have a lot of Z's in them and they're not very smart.
It's Jerry Seinfeld. That's actually what it is. It's actually it's the
Ziri
easiest.
Scheinfeld.
Jiri, yes, of course. Jiri Seinfeld. Yep.
What is deal with local minister of public infrastructure?
Okay, that's just Russian.
I don't. It's fine. It's all the same. What is deal with his policies?
They had to cancel it because there were
Polish
too
Jerry
many.
Seinfeld.
Nobody could like search for the program because there were just too many consonants in the word Seinfeld. Like even though it's just you think, oh, you just add a Z or whatever. No. There's a lot of other consonants that are not doing anything in that pronunciation of Seinfeld.
It's just how it goes.
Decalogue is a fascinating look at the Ten Commandments and the sort of spirituality, at a lot of different things. I think that as someone who like knows the Ten Commandments or whatever, and like whatever, I grew up a Christian and all those things. I think it's it's a weird version of it's weird to go into this with the context of, oh, these are going to be 10 films about the 10 commandments, because it does not take the any easy routes to get to those ideas that it's trying to get at. If we'll talk about Decalogue 5, which feels like the most straightforward, but other than that, I don't know if any of these feel like the moral tales that you kind of expect them to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're not really prescriptive so much as they are about kind of exploring the environment that creates and nurtures these human conflicts.
Mm.
There's a sense of distance and lack of judgment, which is I think if you have in your head like these are 10 movies about the 10 commandments, then you can get something in your head that's a lot more moralistic than what this ends up.
I agree. I think that also, it tackles these subjects with nuance, but it also feels like a lot of these feel like it's a prompt for something different. I think that so much of what the Ten Commandments are in sort of Christian culture is like, oh, these are like 10 good rules for living, but like all in actual Jewish history, it's like they are meant to be like the most sacred laws. It's basically like the Bill of Rights or whatever. It's like the something that's core to what would have been, you know, the Israelites wandering in the desert in Moses' time and everything like that. Like this is their most sacred text or whatever. And I think that this completely removes it from that and is like, all right, well, we're gonna do one about, killing. We're gonna do one about adultery. Oh, we're gonna do one about fathers and mothers. And I don't think it necessarily transfers easily. I don't think any of these movies are that much based off of the Ten Commandments. I kind of want to say that up front because I did not think that. I kind of thought that maybe not that it would be moralistic, but I definitely came into this feeling like, oh, it'll be like a 1-to-1. Okay, the first one's going to be about like, thou shalt have no other gods before me, and then it kind of is, but then the second one is not about like making idols or whatever. Like it's about, not using the name of the Lord in vain, which is weird because it's not about that at all. It's about like a drama that happens, and it's a medical drama. It's very roundabout, I guess.
Yeah, the Kieslowski takes the Ten Commandments and kind of makes his own version of them. He updates them for the modern era. Finally, the reboot of the Ten Commandments, and he made them work. Oh no, that's not true. But like something like 3, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. It becomes a lot more about holidays and like moments in time that have arbitrary meaning assigned to them. In this case, a holiday, i.e. Christmas, and the associated effects of that on human psychology. So there's 2 layers of abstraction there, like figuring out, okay, what 10 of the 10 commandments is this connected to? Well, actually, I think they just go in order, so that's not much history.
They don't. That's what I'm saying. The second one,
don't?
The second of the 10 commandments is don't make yourself an idol or engraving or whatever like that. Like maybe we should look it up. But I mean, for our purposes. But yeah, the
I
second
kind of thought you know off the top of your head.
I do, but I'm saying just so that you've got them in front of you or whatever. The first one is have no other gods before me. The second one is don't make an idol. The third one is don't use the Lord's name in vain. So the fourth one is remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. The fifth one is honor thy father and mother. And then I always get mixed up if the sixth or the seventh one is don't steal, don't murder, and then there's ninth is do not covet. Darn it, I'm missing one. I'm missing 2. I'm missing 8, and I'm missing 10.
Well, there's don't covet your neighbor's possessions and wife, right? Did you get both of them?
Are those 2 separate things?
Yeah.
No. Let's. All right. I thought I really had it. I really had it, dude. All right. Let's pull it up. All right. Here we go. I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee graven images. Thou shalt not take on the name of the Lord God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day. Keep it holy. 5th, honor thy father and mother. 6th, thou shalt not kill. 7th, commit adultery. Obviously, I forgot about that one. 8th, you shall not steal. 9th, you shall not bear false witness against thy neighbor. And then 10th is thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods, which is, yes, does include both versions of coveting. So I was totally off as soon as I got to 5, but for the first 5, I got it. We're talking about supposedly the first 5 right now.
But the idea ultimately is that you do have to do a little bit of legwork to connect the invisible interpretation, Kieslowski's version of the commandment, to what is the current ethical dilemma. I mean, this is fast forwarding to next episode a little bit, but I do think it's interesting that episode 8 is takes place in large part in a classroom where they're debating ethical dilemmas.
Sure.
Which is essentially like what Dekalog is. It felt very reflective in that sense.
It's us, guys.
Yeah.
Was that classroom on a beach?
Yeah. It
was actually Kieslowski. Like, does he look at the camera and he say, "And now all we see everything will be able to dissect"?
So I went with Russian, which
and
is like okay,
Dracula.
Like Dracula, I don't know where that comes from. Was Transylvania at any point ever a part of the Soviet bloc?
I have my D&D books open in front of me, and that was the first thing I thought.
My favorite D&D source book is The Knight versus Dracula.
All right, so
Decalogue 1.
Let's talk Decalogue 1. Let's really dig into this. This is one of my favorites. We don't really have descriptions for each of these, but let's try to summarize this first one as much as possible. A boy questions the existence of God. His father doesn't really believe in God and puts his faith in rational thought, and his aunt puts her faith in the Catholic Church. He questions it, and you kind of like are following the boy as he does whatnot. He looks a little bit like Elijah Wood, and then the boy dies, and it's really sad. The end. That's it. That's all that happens, right?
Did you mention the computer?
Oh yeah, and then also there's this computer that the boy keeps that is his mother, kind of, because his mother is dead. And so he has programmed the computer with his mother's routine so that the computer can do sort of an early version of like smart home things, like, unlocking the door, turning on the faucet, that kind of thing. And because of that, he kind of ascribes meaning to the computer as if it is his mother a little bit. And then it starts turning itself on and saying, "I am ready," in English, no less, which is very fascinating. When the father's around, which is really weird. Um, yeah,
And
that's a
that
good summary.
you
That's as
can
best a
assume then
summary
that
as
the
we're gonna get.
computer is at least one of these stand-ins for the graven images, as in
Sure.
thou shalt not have graven images.
Right, which is why I think it's weird because it's like, is this the second one too? Also, is it trying to say like this is the first and second commandment? I haven't finished the Decalogue, so I don't know. Do they ever do a graven images episode?
I'm the Lord your God, and you shall know their gods before me, and thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images. I think that's the same command.
No, those are two different commandments. That I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt not have no other gods before me. Commandment 1. Commandment 2, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images. That's commandment 2. I mean, like,
Is that another interpretation of you can't take the name in vain? That's
Oh,
number 2.
interesting. I am actually looking this up. Okay. According to the Catholics, the second commandment, you're right. Then the way that you put it is true. You shall have no other gods besides me, and not making a graven image are both combined into one. Whereas you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, and you shall not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor are split into 9 and 10. Whereas the way that I grew up with it, where I grew up in the Protestant church, we split it as the first one is, you shall not. I'm the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods besides me. 1, and then 2 is graven image, and then they go on from there as usual until 9 or until 10, which combines coveting anything that's belonging to your neighbor and your neighbor's wife into one. So that's fascinating. I did not know that. That means that they are going in order, right? Because they're not messing with anything. Because the second one is the Lord name in vain. The third one is keeping Sabbath day holy. Okay, all right, we're back on track.
All right.
So
Okay.
this one is both the engraven images, which is the sort of computer or whatever, and also the Lord your, keep having the Lord your God as your, keeping the Lord your God or whatever. So the computer does kind of stand in for like idolatry in sort of in an old school way. This would be, a bronze statue or something like that. But Kieslowski kind of makes this sort of leap to saying like, well, now we worship computers and these things that have like rational thought, and that is our God, is like rational thought. And the boy's death seems to be like this act of God to say like you should not worship rational thought, because the boy and his father have like calculated that the boy can go ice skating because the ice will be thick enough, and instead the boy falls through and he dies, and it's really heartbreaking and ice breaking.
Yeah, that was also
Mm-hmm.
my interpretation, is that it was some kind of punishment. And I think it's a combination both of the graven image being the computer being invested with this importance, and also the sort of, you could interpret it as the sort of disruption from an alternative
Mm-hmm.
family unit, um, being a single father who is obviously very intellectual. He's a college professor. He prizes intelligence and rationality, as you're saying. He's trying to cultivate Powell as this kind of enlightened new age
Mm-hmm.
man, it seems. Um, like we see him, Powell, having this incredible proficiency in chess, helping his dad in that way, and it almost seems like flying too close to the sun in a way, where I mean, I guess I'm saying that, and it kind of has a lot of literal parallels with the Icarus myth, as Daedalus as this intellectual who has a son who he's sort of trying to raise in his image, and then ultimately
But Icarus is the fool of that story. He's the one who's like so like happy and excited and proud of himself that he ends up like harming himself or whatever. Whereas it feels like the boy puts his faith in his father, and his father kind of fails him.
But isn't that kind of the same thing? Couldn't you argue that Daedalus not adequately preparing Icarus and teaching him the humility that would be required to not to exercise caution there?
I think the specifics of the story is always like Daedalus does tell Icarus, don't fly too close to the sun, and then it happens. Not, you're right, like you could like just, sins of the father type thing. You could say like, well, the son does suffer because the father didn't teach him just not to be proud, not to be stupid or whatever. But he was told, like as I remember the Icarus myth, like he was told, hey, you can't fly too high or else the wax will melt.
I do remember that. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends a little bit on the version of the story, obviously, with mythology, but I think it's fair to at least assume that in any version of the story that Daedalus gives that warning.
Whereas,
so maybe then you could see there.
Whereas here, the warning, it's the exact opposite. Like like his dad's like, it's fine, it's perfectly safe. We've done all of the math, and he's kind of teaching his son to put faith in the science, in the logic of the situation, right? And his son, which is like totally reasonable, and then the son goes out and he dies. I think that that's very, very straightforward. What do you think about the computer, though? Like the computer coming to life or whatever and saying, I am ready. What do you think of that whole, especially at the end where he's just like laying there? What is it that you think is being said there?
Well, I think importantly that comes after the father stumbling across this
desolate
sort
wasteland.
Of post-apocalyptic chapel. Because I mean, it's not even, because desolation implies nothing where there once was something. This is a church that is constructed specifically in this very strict, like, it's an altar made of cinder blocks in this half-finished building with this image of Mary and Jesus that has been put up. And I think what's so interesting is that it feels like an altar that was specifically created in this way, in this sort of strange industrial, like, there's not a clear story on how exactly it gets there, but to me that felt very much like you could see that as a graven image in itself, like kind of this ugly, strange facsimile of a church, or you can see it as something that is true and beautiful but trapped within an ugly thing. And then after he prays, there's the computer saying, I'm ready. And it seems like in that moment when he's sort of given up where he's sort of given himself over to spirituality, to something beyond his own rational understanding of the world. At that point, the graven image becomes I think at that point it becomes invested with truth, and it becomes something that is holy and consecrated. I think that in that sense, like, what it's saying is that what we invest with false importance and with false reverence, it is something that is an aspect of God, but our perception of it is occluded, and we're not recognizing it in its truth as an aspect of God. And by giving ourselves over to God's intentions, then the truth of that thing, as imbued necessarily with an aspect of God, becomes clear to us. That's kind of
You're
my
saying that like
interpretation.
logic or reason or this computer is in its own is an aspect of God, is an extension of him, is a tool that God is using. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because God, as the creator of
Sure.
all things, is necessarily
He
included
sets
in all
reason in
things. That
motion. Yeah.
and yeah, and but I think it's a matter of like being deceived, thinking of the means as an end. Like if you think of logic and reason as in themselves the cornerstones of a good life, or the things that can end up guiding you, and don't go one step further to realizing their connection to the fundamental creative force of the universe, then that is what's kind of being argued against here.
Gotcha. Yeah, I basically agree. My only question then is, what is the significance of like I'm ready? What is it that it's do you especially because it's like the English sentence in all of these films that like comes across is not translated. What do you think? Like I'm not even ascribing that much to the fact that it is in English, but it stands out certainly. Is it this sort of
I
like,
think it's
is it God reaching out and saying like I'm whatever, especially because they all this mother stuff is like invested in the computer? Is it the mother's spirits readying him, the father for this salvation, this spiritual reawakening, or what?
I think that it's some combination of the mother,
Mm.
Powell, and God. At this point, now that the father has given
Mm.
himself over, then he is ready. So the computer, as now a sanctified graven image, is ready to help him correspond with his newfound
Mm.
spirituality.
I could see that. I think that this is also one of the most like haunting looking of the movies. I love this one so much because it kind of feels like a kids movie at first. It shot from like it's shot from usually like a kid's perspective, and when it doesn't shoot like the adults from sort of like looking up at them in mediums, it's always like in a real tight close up on their face. It reminded me of like the opening scenes of Neverending Story, or any of these like sort of 80s or Goonies or something like that, where it's like these 80s kind of movies that are trying to show you the world from a kid's perspective, and basking in the glow of the computer and this mysterious force that's outside of them. It's like E.T. It feels like those movies are it feels like it is kind of setting you up for that kind of story, which makes it all the more devastating when the kid dies and you're left with just like these sad adults that you've been watching from this child's perspective, because suddenly they break down in a way that they maybe wouldn't in front of the kid. They suddenly become realer people. I think it's shot absolutely beautifully. This is probably the best shot of the 10. I didn't know that it was 9 different cinematographers. I think that Kieslowski comes across in every single one of these, but I also think that this is each of them does feel very distinctively like they are trying to tell a very specific story and do it from a different perspective. This feels like a kids movie in the same way that we'll get to the third one. The third one feels like it's like kind of a almost hallmarky is a bad word, but like it feels like it's like a Christmas movie. It does kind of indulge in the cheer of that sort of season with like lights and decor and everything like that. And I love this. I think that this is like very very intimate in how it's shot. Would you like to move on to two?
I
Let's
think so. I think we've gotten somewhere interesting.
let's talk two. Uh, this is the one about God's name in vain. Um, the the let's a woman her keeps on approaching this doctor who lives in her apartment building. Also, by the way, all these people live in the same apartment building. Probably important to mention that we just didn't mention that. Um, but this woman keeps on approaching this doctor who is treating her husband, and asking for updates on him, whether he's going to die or not. The doctor will not say. He says he doesn't know, and the woman says, "I'm actually pregnant with another man's baby, and I want to know whether to abort it or not." That's sort of the setup. Um, and the man kind of makes a miraculous recovery at the end and says that he's seen the other side. And yeah, what does this have to do with using God's name in vain? Because I like your reading of the Sabbath one, where it's like it's not so much about this keeping the Sabbath in general, but keeping these holidays, these places that have meaning that we ascribe to them or whatever. Like that makes sense. Using God's name in vain, I was waiting for a moment where maybe not saying, oh, like specifically using God's name in vain, but maybe possibly a bit of blaspheming in some way to take place, and it never does.
My abiding theories at this point. Does that make sense? Abiding theories?
That's
No, that
fine.
doesn't.
Yeah,
What
keep
was I
it.
trying to say?
No explanations, no explorations. We're going forward.
Well, I would like to explain something so that I don't
Ugh.
look stupid.
Bro, I did not remember
Yeah, because abiding
what the
means
10
to
Commandments were earlier
land.
this episode. Come on, you can look stupid.
Oh, I didn't know we weren't cutting all of that out.
We're cutting some of that certainly, but I'm telling people now that we cut it out, that I did something stupid, so that people know how stupid I was.
My theory is that kind of, I think it's infidelity in a sense that is being positioned as blasphemy, or actually no, I don't think it's infidelity. I think that's too simple. I think that it's about this woman questioning if she's engaging in blasphemy by loving two people at the same time. Like, that is the important thing for me here, is that she isn't cheating on her husband and wants to avoid the consequences. There is that, but she loves her husband and she also loves someone else. And that this is a disastrously complicated way to live your life. And I think that she's coming to realize that, in a sense, I think blasphemy is one of those religious crimes that's the least defined, because blasphemy can take so many different forms. It can take the literal form of saying, God, I hope that guy sucks my dick.
Great.
Yeah. I was trying to think.
Yeah. No explanations. Keep going. Keep going.
You're right. My apologies. Oh
No
fuck. No
apologies,
apologies
no.
either. But there's so many different definitions of blasphemy too, right? Like, some people argue that eating McDonald's every day is a form of blasphemy because your body was given to you by God and is therefore sacred, and to demean it is a sin of blasphemy. And I think that the question kind of here is that how far it's kind of the idea to me of, if you're exploring an alternate method of living and trying to live your life in a way that is unconventional, or outside of the standards of what society would have you believe is a regular and honest human life, like in this case of exploring polyamory, I guess, then can that be seen as blasphemy? Like, is the order of the world and nature, quote unquote, as we perceive it, is that something that can't be interrupted, or is blasphemous?
But
to
she
interrupt?
also she ends
That's kind of where
she
I'm
ends by saying I'm when we are introduced to this character, she already knows that she has to make that decision between the two. This isn't a movie about her. Like, she says that of course, that she's like, I love them both and I wish I could just keep on going on this, but it's not a story about her trying to balance these two lives or create this life for herself that's outside of the norm or whatever. It is instead her trying to uh deal with the fact that she has to make a decision now. Or in some way, right? Like she has to either stick with him or stick with her husband or go with this other guy. She has to whatever. Although the end is very, you're the end leaves it up to interpretation. You don't get to see her. She's not the last shot of the movie. You don't know what happens to her. Um, but although it does sound like she's like telling her husband that she's going to have a baby, even if he doesn't know that it's not his baby. What?
Yeah, the last scene is between Andre
Mm.
and the doctor after Andre wakes up, and
It's
line that
crazy how
I
well they do like making him seem absolutely beyond death or whatever, and then having this guy like walk around, you're suddenly like, oh my gosh, what happened? Like he's like okay.
you almost you almost got the sense, I think, that he's kind of this that he was kind of seeing everything. I sort of saw his role as like not so much asleep
Sure.
but dreaming of the film itself. I don't really have any specific basis for that other than it
It does
sounds
sound cool,
cool.
sure.
But the way that it's shot kind of suggested that to me in a way that's immaterial, and I won't expand on it. But the line that stuck with me in the ending scene between Andre and the doctor is when Andre asks the doctor, "Do you know what it means to have a child?" And the doctor responds that he does. And I thought it was really interesting that Andre was positing that to the doctor, because Andre is the one who just learned that he has a kid. He was going to have a kid, and we can assume hasn't had a kid before. So why is he asking then the doctor, "Do you know what it means to have a child?"
I wonder if he's
I
asking
think
the
that
doctor
that
like, hey, do you know that this is actually my wife cheating on me or whatever, that this isn't my kid? Because I know that it's not my kid, but we're not going to address that. Is the question is was one of the interpretations that I thought about, is like he's saying, do you know what it means to have a kid? Wink wink, nudge nudge. And he's like, yeah, I know your wife, was cheated on you or whatever. And he goes, yep, anyway, that's the life I'm living now.
maybe I I kind of came into that scene with the idea that Andre did have this kind of knowledge,
Sure.
and that I I don't know, it's just the way that I was watching it suggested to me that like he knows more than he's letting on, and he's letting on nothing because
Mm.
he's sleeping. He's unconscious from an unnamed evil disease.
Right.
So I don't know, it's I I don't. This one like didn't immediately stand out to me, but there are a lot of small things with the characters. Like I think the doctor is very interesting. His relationship with Dorota, how he's like this nasty old guy at first who we're introduced her saying, "Hey, remember me? I ran over your dog. Anyway, how's how's my
Yeah.
husband doing?" Like
He's not even that
there's this kind
nasty.
of
Like
like
we're given a little bit of fleshing out of him, and he like talks to his maid about like stories that he happened.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
he's
sure, he's gruff.
gruff
Yeah,
at worst.
and it feels like he's doing like very much like, I'm just doing my job, ma'am, kind of like guy who's very short about it, and he gets very annoyed, but he puts up with a lot of crap. This woman stalks him across like like we get the most of the Decalogue of the apartment complex in this movie in a way, because we just watch him like try to dodge her, and then she just walks straight into his apartment and starts smoking, and he's like, please smoke. Like, yeah, he's kind of gruff, but man, he puts up with a lot. I think it's actually fascinating. Like I was trying to get a reading on this doctor, and there's a shot for me that I cannot quite put together. This is probably the most supernatural looking of the all of the movies that we've seen so far, of the five. Well, I guess five is pretty crazy, but like this is the one. They've got the shot of, obviously the fly escaping the jam preserves. That sort of, it feels, I mean, that metaphor pretty much writes itself pretty easily. That's, his the guy's soul kind of coming back, returning to, like, he makes this miraculous recovery and all that. And because that's the scene that happens right before he like walks around and is like, "Hey, how you doing? I'm having a kid." And then there's that crazy, crazy, crazy shot that starts like up and pans all the way down, and you see the doctor like with this red light around him, kind of looking in on what's his name? You said it's Andre is what you said his name is.
That's my best guess at the
He
pronunciation. It's got a few Z's in it
sure
because it's
sure.
Poland, but I'm calling him Andre.
That you're right. All right, I see you. I now realize that you can just like look at the Criterion cast list and they actually list them in order, so that's pretty easy. But yeah, he's with that like shot of looking down at him, or like looking up at him from like the depths of hell or whatever, is crazy. It looks like he's like Satan or the devil or whatever, which is weird because it butts up against every other interpretation I have of that character. What do you think that is?
I honestly don't recall the specific moment
Oh
that you're
man,
referring
dude.
to.
The thing is, I this is this is the moment when I realized that Kieslowski is very similar to Todd Haynes and like May December and that sort of like melodramatic kind of feeling to his camera work that feels like it's like trying to be observational. It's kind of peering. It's got this like curiosity about what's going on, and it feels like especially in this one. When it moves as your head does. It kind of does these little like turns. It doesn't do a lot of like pans or pushes or whatever. It is trying to kind of emulate what a person who is like hanging out in that room would do. And every time like someone stands up, it kind of maybe like tilts up a little bit. It feels like you're trying to like participate in the thing. And so that shot just felt completely out of that shot was like the most um like stylistic where it like kind of broke the format of the whole thing. So that's why I brought it up. But maybe yeah, I think I have a really good like I recall these like shots or these ideas or these moments or whatever. And you're way better at like character names and things that are important to the plot. Whereas I'm like, wait, what? Did that happen? I don't remember. The things that are like way more important.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just couldn't really see the Doctor as a
Sure.
malignant figure, but I suppose
I
it's
I don't
possible.
I
It
don't
would
see
be
him.
cool. I think that's an
I
interesting
didn't
version of
see
it.
him as that, except that one crate. Well, you'll just have to. Didn't you? Did you watch this one twice? I saw it in your. Okay, I
No,
saw
just
on your
once.
letterbox.
I might
Yeah,
have
you logged
listed
it
it
twice, and I
twice.
was like, oh, he must have really liked this one because he logged it twice. And then I was like, yeah, maybe it was a mistake. But
It was quite a mistake. I can't think of a single thing that we've watched so far where I'm like, I'm immediately
well,
going to
they're only
watch
an
it
hour
again.
long. I could have
Deal.
seen you do that. I would if I had more time. I
Right.
might have done that just for one of the ones that I really liked because there's so much here. Let's move on to Decalogue 3, which is my favorite. It is a story about a woman who this woman and this man. Uh, it's Eva and Janus, is that his name? And they apparently they had an affair a long time ago, where they both cheated on their respective partners. And now 3 years later, Eva comes to Janus and says, "My husband is missing. I need you to help me find him. It's Christmas Eve. Please do this for me." And Janus lies to his wife and says, "Oh, our car was stolen, and I have to go." And he goes out, and the central tension is are Janus and Eva gonna sleep with each other? And is Eva lying about her husband, which we actually, as the audience, know that she is, to some extent, lying about her husband. Um, but and is Janus gonna find out about that? I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that name, but here we are.
Yeah, so this is your favorite. This was the one that I liked the least. I'm
We're
going to let
swamped on
you
this.
spit on it. But, well, I will say I liked it the least, but the form is still incredible. Kieslowski has an incredible eye for for tone and color and lighting. The environments are always incredibly well realized. They feel incredibly lived in a way that's very authentic to the tone. I just want to acknowledge that none of these are bad.
No.
I like this the least of this batch because it tells you why you care about the characters at the end after you should have already cared about the characters. So on a rewatch, I think it's going to be a lot better, but for me it just did not hit properly the first time around. But I'll let you go ahead and talk about what you think is hitting.
First of all, it's Janusz. Janusz. That's apparently the pronunciation. So I'm messing it up. The second thing is, I think that what helped me is that for all of these, I read the like little criteria. Sean and I ordered the Blu-ray so that we could watch all these, and Sean got the digital copy and I got the physical copy here, which means that I'm a little biased because I then, when you go to select the movie, they have a little paragraph saying this is what this one's about, and so I just read the little paragraph descriptor and dove right into it. And because of that, I already knew, like, oh, these are two people who have slept with each other before, and now they're going to go on an adventure or whatever, or they're going to do something. Who knows, right? So I kind of already had that preloaded. That might be my own fault. That being said, I didn't find that we needed to care too much about these characters. I thought that these it was more fascinating to me to see this as sort of a combination of like a subgenre of Christmas movies, which is about how Christmas sucks, and also the sort of the sort of situation that you might find yourself in of like, this is how cheating works. We've talked about this with Brief Encounter before. I really like these stories sometimes that are about like relationships and the honesty of like monogamy and that kind of thing, because I think that when you can get really honest about it, there's a lot of truth there that isn't uncovered enough. And I think that this movie really gets to it, of like, he's like, he goes along with her, helping her, but he also, Janusz, he kind of knows that Eva's probably up to something, and he very quickly is like, why is there no snow on the car? What's going on with this? Are you sure that this is his scarf? You know, that kind of thing. He keeps on questioning her, and yet he continues to go along with it, maybe because he's gonna sleep with her. Like, there's that weird tension of like, is he gonna go too far? Is she gonna go too far? Are they gonna at what point are they going to break this illusion of oh, I'm looking for my husband in that way? When is that gonna turn into like a sort of code for, there are bats in my attic, will you help me get the bats out, kind of a thing, um I think that it's beautifully shot. I think that this is maybe my favorite in terms of the shot choices. I love that they start with like him dressed as Santa Claus going to his kids, because the kids are inconsequential to this movie, but it just shows you like he really does care about his wife. He really does care about doing these things, because otherwise why would he? I like that they get into like the nitty gritty of like the cotton is stuck on his face, and it's like a little annoying, because it shows you that like it isn't just, even though it's Christmas Eve, this being a husband or father or whatever isn't easy necessarily. And so it's not just saying like, well, like if they had just depicted him like on Christmas Day or on Christmas Eve being like, and a toast and everyone, we're all having a good time and da 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 da, you would not necessarily think that, oh well, that means he's a good father. It just means he's having a good time. But instead, to show a little bit of the work that goes into being a father and husband, I think really does a lot for me to solidify him as, this is a character we're looking into, that we now have to hope that he doesn't make the wrong choices. And I I kind of agree that the you don't know how to necessarily care for Eva, the woman, um, but I like the mystery of her. I like unpacking that. I think that that is fascinating, especially because you are kind of given her perspective at first, sort of as she sets up this trap for him to fall into, where it's like, well, oh, my husband's missing and everything. You don't know why she's doing it, but I think it's fascinating enough. So I don't really see this as like a story where you have to care about the characters too much. You have to just care about the situation, and kind of in sort of like a horror movie way. You're like, what would I do, or how far would I go, or what would happen? And I really liked that, especially because it ends up being kind of optimistic. Yes, at the end of the day, he did lie to his wife and everything, and yes, his wife is the one who has to like pull out the lies from him. But when he does, he does say like, I'm not going to do this anymore. That was a one-time thing because it was Christmas or whatever. And I think that is fascinating when you look at this as the movie about the Sabbath day and keeping that holy. That's me spitting. That's basically everything I have to say about it.
Yeah, I do really like the idea of exploring temporal repositories of meaning and holidays.
Repositories of meaning. That we should ban that too. No long words. No,
what?
Temporal repositories of meaning. Come on. You can have you no more.
But you know what I'm saying, though. That's not
no
too
more
smart
than 3 syllables. Yeah, no, it's not too long. You're just showing me up because I'm sitting here being like, oh wow, it's so beautiful. It's like these other movies and and you're like temporal repository of meaning, and I'm like, okay, awesome.
All right,
I'm
sorry.
No words more than 3 syllables. Temporal repositories of movies.
This is a very much my girlfriend complains that my dick is too big situation here. Not that I've any experience with any part of that, but
okay, we're just gonna leave that one. No explanations.
Dekalog 4.
Do you have anything else to say about Dekalog 3 though?
No, not really. I just like the concept that it's getting at, and I don't know. I just wasn't as compelled by it. I think that the characterization is a big part of why the other ones are so strong, but it's not necessarily the bread and butter of these, which I get. It's just like it's my least favorite because that's the tiebreaker.
I got you. I understand. Number 4 is it's an absolute masterwork of just two-person drama. It is absolutely fast. I just can't believe that this was pulled off in this way. You don't realize how little is like happening, if that makes any sense. Like there's not a lot of like twists, or excuse me, there's not a lot of twists that are not caused by the characters' actions and their discussions. It feels
it's hyper
yes,
character
and
or character driven.
It's the story of this father and daughter, and this daughter opens this envelope that says it's supposed to be opened after her mother dies. Her mother is dead, and the father goes off on vacation, and the daughter she's like 18. She's an adult, right? Or she's in her
She's in
gotcha.
college.
Okay, so she's in college, and she, while her father is gone, she sees this. She takes this envelope that says, like to be opened after my death, which is written by her mother, and she opens it and she tells her father that inside she found a note that said that that the daughter is not actually the father's daughter, and that unleashes the fact that the daughter and the father have sexual feelings for one another, and they have to reconcile that. Now, similar to the third movie's tension of like, are they going to sleep together? I found this movie's tension of are they going to sleep together also like another version of that. Although I think that we get way more characterization for the daughter than either the characters in the third film at first. I still felt this very
well. You get a very clear picture of their relationship. The very first scene is them kind of goofing off in a way that makes them seem more like siblings than father and daughter. You kind of immediately get this impression that their relationship is closer in a different way than an average father and daughter. And at first you can kind of chalk that up to, okay, single father, mom's not around,
Right.
this is the kind of relationship that naturally develops. But of course, as we go on, that gets more and more
And
called into question, the exact
that
nature of their
scene is
feelings.
basically like a really good short film within this short film because it ends with him like throwing there she throws water on him, they run around, and then he throws water on her, and because she's wearing white, like you see a bunch of her skin, and she's like kind of half covering herself, and he kind of does this thing of like straightening up and like being like, all right, well, no more fooling around or whatever, and he like walks out or whatever, and you get everything you need in that moment, like that. Oh, it's so rough, man. Like you just understand like there's this weird tension of we can only, mess around to a point. We can only and you can't necessarily in that scene interpret whether it's like we can only we can only be like brother and sister to a point of like and then at a certain point I got to be your father or whatever. Or you can interpret it as like we can only have this familial connection to a certain point, and at which point we have to like not talk about like our sexual feelings to one another. It's fascinating. And the camera is uh like less polished. It feels like this whole thing is like sillier than the other movies. I did talk about the third one as being kind of like hallmarky, but the third one at least has these like gawking like wide shots that are perfectly composed or whatever. This one feels like it's just kind of instead of peering, it's just slides around near like waist level, kind of looking up at them. And it feels like it's more observational. It feels like it's not we're not like gawking at them. We are trying to it feels like we are like a member of the family. And their whole relationship kind of comes apart until something and they hope that something irreversible doesn't happen. And then there's the twist, which is that and she never opened the envelope, which I really love because after all that, like it basically comes down to her throwing herself at him. She's still covered. There's that weird moment where she undresses completely, but then she covers herself with her arms, which I think is a brilliant choice. Not just because like whatever television censorship that might have happened, but also because she's going to let him make the final move. Like she's not completely burying herself for him. She is going to let him be the one to take down her arms and just, take her or whatever. And he like covers her with like a sweater and everything and kind of reasserts their relationship as father and daughter by bringing up like memories of them or her as a kid. And all that's brilliant. And then afterwards, she then reveals that she never opened the envelope, even though they've had these sexual feelings for one another. And I love that because then they burn the envelope, which is very fascinating, the actual envelope. I love that up until the point where then she's like, "Oh, let me read like the bits that are left in this burnt envelope." And it looks like it's saying that maybe he's not my father. I didn't like that. I thought that was one step too far.
I get that. I'm not totally sure how I feel about it, but what I thought was really interesting was that they decide to burn the envelope and then they still read it
Yeah.
after the fact. Like, that was the part that was like, okay, that's a very compelling open question that I am going to be left with is they burn the envelope. Like, what is the point behind burning the envelope but then deciding still that you want to know what's in it? It's this kind of, I don't know, it's this very pessimistic thing, I think, because the idea is that,
They're not willing to commit to like the decision, I guess.
and also that there's this sort of impossibility to, like, humans can never resolve themselves to a
Hmm.
comfortable fiction, and that's just kind of a fundamental tragedy, is that, like, you innocence is bliss, but it's ultimately not tenable.
I see that. I also just think though that it feels like it feels like it's manufactured. It doesn't feel like it is it like when they burn it, I'm there it does feel like they found an ending to a certain extent. And their decision to just, read just like the opening lines of it that basically say like he is not your or whatever. It doesn't say your, but like he is not and then it's burned off or whatever. That felt a little hammy in a way that the rest of the film did not.
I guess so. I get that. I think the thing that doesn't get me fully to disliking it is really just that it provokes interesting questions, and I haven't yet untangled enough of those questions to come to whether I like that they were posed in the first place. So that's an open question for
me. Do you have any other things you want to say about this one? I kind of went through the I think the performance. I think this is the best performed of the 5 we've covered so far. Obviously they're given the most to like chew on. The dynamics are like really strong here, but I love that it feels like, unlike the other ones which sort of deal in these grander emotions, this is so nuanced that you are looking at every little twitch of their faces for sort of meaning, whether it, like in the moment where he like slams the door so hard the glass breaks, or the it's not just frustration, it's a very particular kind of frustration, and you're kind of trying to interpret like how sexual is this frustration, right? Like I love that. I think it's really fascinating. I think at least the daughter might maybe, if I know that we're starting early, but maybe a Trenty contender. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't.
It's a fascinating performance. I also think it's funny that she's just like this. She's also got this whole like, what did you describe it as? You before we recorded, this whole vibe she has, college,
neurodivergent art school.
Yeah, and we're Americans, we fall for that real easily. But she is like, but she has a very specific personality in a way I don't think most of the other characters in these other movies have. And I really think that I don't know. She's the most fleshed out, and I really enjoyed just watching the whole thing for her performance.
And I think last thing to note is watch this space as far as Anka is concerned, who is the protagonist here. Because I don't know if you've gotten yet.
Haven't watched anything except these 5 and a short film about love.
Okay, just keep that in mind.
I'm so hyped.
Keep Anka in your heart.
Keep the space open for Anka. Great, awesome. Let's talk about killing, because that one was honor thy father and mother, which is wild. Absolutely wild.
Yeah, these two thankfully don't require that much untangling to figure
how they're
out
connected.
what they're
how they're connected.
Which of the commandments they're kind of getting at.
The 5th one is about killing. It's and this is where we get into the comparisons between a short film about killing and the 5th Decalogue. Sean, why don't you try to summarize what happens in this movie? Because I've kind of done it.
So it's pretty simple. A man we follow in the extended version, we get a lot more of a picture of an aspiring lawyer named Gyotr, and he is an idealistic young man who has just passed the bar, who is in the prime of his life. He's getting married. We eventually learn that he's going to have a child soon. He is this sort of model citizen. And again, this is the extended version that puts more focus on Pyotr.
The extended version is the one where he yells like, he's at the taxi. He's like next to a taxi. He's yelling like, I passed the bar. I'm a lawyer. And the taxi's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, we have these. The extended version is much more focused on the deuteragonists. But the real focus here is on a young man who, about halfway through the film, commits a murder. And the lead up to that is essentially him doing like a 4chan guy trying to be normal. Like going around, mouth slightly agape, posture not quite there, but he's trying. Just having extremely stilted, strange interactions with various cashiers and passersby, until eventually he decides to kill a man for his car. And we smash cut past that moment to the trial where Pyotr is his defense lawyer who has done everything that he possibly can to acquit him, has a conversation with the judge about it, but he has ultimately received the death penalty, and then he is executed. That is essentially the thrust of this thing. And the sort of death penalty aspect and the debate on the morality of that is, it gets a lot of play. I think that there's a little bit more to it than that. I don't think it's so much I think it's less about the moralist argument on whether or not the death penalty is a legitimate
Which I think
punishment,
it is. I think
that
is
something we as a
this
civil society
is.
should pursue. I think that that's part of it, sure, but I think it's much more so about accepting as a society responsibility for not just the death penalty and the crimes we commit in the name of justice, or not even necessarily crimes, what we do in the name of justice, and the extent to which that is just when the conditions that we as a civilization create ultimately, like, it's sort of this inelegant way of creating social outliers, doing our best to ostracize them, and then doing what we need to do to dispose of them cleanly after the fact. Like the protagonist, the murderer, seems very much to me like this maladjusted social outlier who there just isn't space for. And this sort of process of quiet, polite, very decorum focused method of disposing of that person. And Pyotr realizing his place as a cog in that machine and questioning his place there, because he is meant to be the defense lawyer, right? As someone who provides a fair trial so that the illusion, or you don't even have to say illusion, so that the structure of civility is maintained. And he's sort of questioning that because ultimately, as the judge himself admits, this kid was always going to get the death penalty, and Pyotr's work was essentially in vain. But the fact remains that his work is an important step in the process itself. And I think that that's something that's the main thing that he butts up against, is the idea that I am sort of as much, in his mind, he's sort of as much to blame as anyone else for the death of this guy, because he is part of that process. He is one of the signatures that has to go on the paper that signs his writ of execution, because they say, all right, he got a fair trial by a competent lawyer. Now we can kill him. And it comes into conflict, I think, with Pyotr's reckoning of himself as someone who preserves life. So I don't know. What do you think, first of all, of the differences between the two versions? Because I think that Pyotr's moral position is so fascinating that it is worth taking a little bit of extra time in the extended cut to get more of him.
I don't know. I didn't like fleshing out Pyotr so much. I did not find him that. It's kind of the thing that you said about 3, which is like I didn't find him that fascinating as a character. And I generally thought that he was basically a stand-in for us, and so giving us more backstory of like, I'm so happy I got my the bar, and I've got a wife and kids and all that, like, didn't feel like it was useful, especially because they still leave some of that in. There's still that moment where he's talking to the is it the judge, who's like, hey man, by the way, we see each other so little. I heard you had a new kid. You know, that's awesome or whatever. Like, we still have moments of his humanity, and I feel like he's better served as a stand-in for the audience than he is, as like as a fully fleshed out character. I think my biggest thing with the extended short film about killing uh sort of cut or whatever is that the actual Decalogue 5 is kind of tight in terms of its edit. When it cuts from Piotr very quickly to Jessic, and like what he's doing, and it feels like they're cutting back and forth as if they're in the same scene. It doesn't spend a lot of time kind of just dwelling with one and then cutting to the other for the next scene, if that makes any sense. It's like their scenes are happening simultaneously, and I enjoy that a little bit more. I think
Mm-hmm.
it makes it feel more like these two people are connected and will, kind of butt heads, instead of us saying like, okay, we know where this is going. Like it feels very obvious, especially because we know that it's called a short film about killing. We're like, we know that he's gonna have he's gonna kill someone, and then there's gonna be a trial about over him that this guy's gonna do. And obviously, they kind of skip the whole trial, but which is a little bit of a subversion. But in general, I think that the audience quickly is able to catch on to that. And so, what the least they could do is to keep up the rhythm, the speed of having the cuts between them kind of bring these two characters together, kind of emphasizing their destiny, as opposed to sort of having Jarek do a scene, and now we're going to have Piotr do a scene. And so I think that it would just be better if they kept doing that. I also think that the taxi driver is given a little bit of emphasis. He's the one who gets to say like, "Well, good for you. You passed the bar. Who cares, right?" And I don't know if I really can do much with that. The taxi driver is a victim in the situation, sure, and it definitely feels like it's participatory in this sort of debate over, the death penalty and everything. But it doesn't feel like it doesn't add enough. I like it almost uses the Piotr treatment to the taxi driver, where it's like give flesh him out and exactly why he dies and everything. The execution is
Mm-hmm.
also kind of the only thing I will say is that the execution is kind of rushed in Decalogue 5 as opposed to a short film about killing. I feel like that's your centerpiece. That's where the all emotions really come from, and then
I love the execution
I
scene.
agree. Yo,
Like
I
the
agree.
level of kind of like that's I love the sort of relative
Mm,
informality of it and sort of the strange like panicked like when the guy is winding the rope and he's like okay well do this it's this sudden breakout of like it feels like people operating a
mm,
machine more so than like than the rest of this process, which has been full of decorum and politeness and
mm.
euphemism. It is just the raw, uncut, undeniable savagery of it, and yeah, I think that scene specifically is what makes the most sense to me as like okay um here's the savagery of
Yeah.
this process. Do you want to continue buying into it? Like that's the fundamental question that
I
scene poses, and I think it does it just
and
excellently. So well performed, so well
that's
edited,
why I
so
like the
well shot.
short film about killing a little bit more for that scene only, where I like getting more of that. I like just the slow builds, the anticipation of his death, but also like it's not indulgent. It's not like it then like zooms in on his face as like the rope falls or whatever. It just feels both like it's just part of the process and also, showing you the savagery of the thing. It's better in the sort of extended cut. But that's the only reason that the extended
Mm-hmm.
cut's better. That's the only way that the extended cut is better, in my opinion. I think that in general, the fifth Decalogue just gets the thing done in a smarter, better paced, uh, tighter way.
Mm-hmm.
I liked this
Yeah.
one the least, but I also think that it's valuable. I did find it a little didactic in a way that you clearly didn't. I thought that it was very much like this is a moral story that ends with like, all right, and you shouldn't. You should. The real killing was the killing that we did along the way. Like that feels like it's basically the thing. And this character, I don't necessarily get this whole like plight of this character trying to say like, well, if society hadn't treated him this way, then maybe he wouldn't have done it, especially because his crime was so clearly just an act of rebellion in the same way that like throwing a rock around was an act of rebellion, or you know scattering this woman's birds or whatever was just it's just chaos for chaos's sake. He's a Joker type. He's crazy, man. Why so serious?
Well, I think he's very clearly not
Mm.
a Joker type in the important sense that Joker was ideological, and this guy is anything but
Mm.
ideological. Like he's pure, just
Yeah,
lashing out.
pure
Like Joker
emotion.
had intention and philosophy, which are both completely lacking from this guy's
See,
internal life.
what's so fascinating about, well, we can't get into the Joker. Actually, we should, no Joker. Let's not talk about the Joker. No
No
Joker.
Joker,
None of
none
that.
Joker,
Yeah,
all
let's
done.
just be done. Let's not talk about the Joker. And with that, I think we're done. Sean, what you have anything else to say about the Decalogue as a whole, or about a short film about killing?
Well, I do want to. Obviously, we're going to talk about the Decalogue as a whole more, but what do we think at this point of the blonde observer, as I've called him, who we see in all of these films so far in varying capacities?
I have no idea who you're talking about.
So, do you remember the scenes in Decalogue 1 of the guy fishing? And you were like, why are we seeing this
Yes.
guy fishing in the pond? Do you remember the guy
Of
carrying
course,
the
that
canoe
one's a very
in
distinctive one, yeah.
Decalogue 4? They're all the same guy.
Whoa.
We have seen him in every one of these
Okay.
films. So
If
I guess we don't think much of the
uh-huh.
blonde observer now,
The key,
but
maybe it's just Kieslowski as a person. Is it? I mean, that's pretty dumb. But like, it also feels like is it trying to say like, well, he's this guy, we're all observing these things, and we try not to but he also, like, those two examples, I don't know where else he's seen. I'm sure that he's like, I don't know, one of the drunk guys in the drunk tank of 3 or something like that, but who yells about like wanting to go home. But he I don't know, I have no idea. I didn't realize that was the same guy. That's crazy.
well, along with Anka, keep him in your head, keep him in your heart as we go into the
I'm
rest of
so
these.
excited. I'm excited. I'm hope that Anka comes back, and I hope that the 10th one is just Anka proposing marriage. That's really what I hope is what happens.
Cool. To her
Yeah.
dad.
Again. Uh, and with that, let's get into our ranking. Sean, we have a fresh, clear slate. I don't know how we're going to deal with the Decalogue as a whole. We should probably we'll see. But let's just rank the Decalogues. What do we got so far, Sean? Why don't you start us off?
So, my list, I've decided, well, I can get into that when it becomes important. So, I've watched ahead a
Oh
little
no.
bit. But I'm not gonna reveal
We're
anything,
ranking out of
obviously.
5.
So in ascending order,
Mm.
Decalogue 3 was my least favorite.
Mm.
Decalogue 2, then
Mm.
Decalogue 4, then Decalogue 1, then Decalogue 5 slash a short film about
Whoa.
killing. I'm still debating exactly how to divide it. A short film about killing in Decalogue 5. Right now, I just have them in the same
Mm.
ostensible position. But we'll see if I even decide to include short film about killing in the
Right,
Decalogue
because it technically
as a
is just
whole.
like a bonus feature. I don't know. Sean, my list
Mm-hmm.
is exactly the same except for 5 and 3 being swapped. Decalogue 5 is
That's
number
fine.
is 5. No, I would put short film about killing below that if I ranked it, which I did not. Decalogue 2 is number 4. Decalogue 4 is number 3. Decalogue 1 is number 2, and then Decalogue 3 is number 1. That is That's crazy. I did not realize that was going to happen. The one thing I'll say is the more I think about it, the more I like Decalogue 4. Whereas, like, when I first saw Decalogue 1, I was like, this is this thing that's, like, haunting me that I'm thinking about. But Decalogue 4 also, like, especially after this conversation, I think it really brings up a lot. And maybe I've underrated it. But that's a crazy ranking. That's crazy that we both did the same thing except for, the core 1 and 5 positions.
Okay, I think that was a good first
It
season
was. It was
2
very
episode.
beachy. There was a lot of tropical stuff
Uh
going
huh.
on. I got a pina colada. It was great. And Sean, I think next week we already know what we're doing next week. We're doing Decalogue 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and as well as a short film about love, which I've already seen, and that's a handful. It sure is crazy. I want to spoilers. We're gonna compare it to Rear Window and Peeping Tom because yeah, obviously it's gonna be great.
Why the hell
and
not?
With that, thank you all for listening to our first ever episode of Always See Everything Season 2. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Tune in next week for us to dissect Decalogue 6 through 10. We have some cool episodes coming up after that where we will not just talk about, these Polish films based off the Ten Commandments about, communist 80s Poland or whatever. Tune in for all that. And as always, you know what, Sean? Oh my gosh. Oh, Sean, I'm having a vision. I'm at top of a mountain. This is just, Mr. Criterion is here. Mr. Collection himself is here. He's
Oh
passing
my
down.
God, you've sucked me into your
Oh
vision.
my gosh, he's passing down the 5 commandments of Always See Everything Season 2. Wait, what are these?
Oh my gosh,
it's all tied
finally!
in. Number 1, no explanations. Number 2, no apologies. Number 3, no explorations. Number 4, no words more than 3 syllables. And number 5, no Joker discussion.
I mean, that's a good set of rules as any.
He ditched the thou shalt not format for just no, but I mean, it's pretty good. Thank you very much, Mr. Collection.
They're updated.
Oh, he's going to. Oh, he's maybe he'll
age.
come back next week for the next 5. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah. Now that he's gone, just between you and me, that guy's a fucking piece of shit.
He makes us watch all these movies.
Do I look like Kermit when I do this?
Okay, and this is why we cut these things out. This is why we still have an editor.
Oh, we still have an editor.
Yes, we do. You're stuck with that. Even on the beach here, which is what's going on right now, we still have.
We're currently in different rooms in the same beach house.
That's exactly what's going on. I just moved my entire setup behind me, and we're all here.
Perfect recreations of our home environment.